They should stick by their guns if they have good intentions and fight for them, even if some people may look at them as being naive or out of order, what have you. Stick to your guns, believe in yourselves. We'll also consider that most people are kind. Many are not, true. But try to find those in whom you can have trust, like-minded, not necessarily politically, but like-minded in terms of the values, and create strong bonds to move forward on important issues. Never give up. You fall on your nose, you get up again. You fall many times, but you stand up. You never give up.
Welcome to another episode of Success with Purpose, where we help mentor you into becoming a more successful version of yourself. We do this through giving you access to mentors you typically would never have the opportunity to connect with. We explore their journeys, their experiences, their life-changing events, their fields of expertise, and most importantly, their purpose. My name is Harry Goldberg, husband to an incredible woman, father of 2 amazing daughters, host, interviewer, and interrogator of this podcast. And now, just before we learn from yet another exceptional guest, if you find value from these conversations, please make sure to like and subscribe below, leave a review. It really does make a difference. And of course, share with someone else who's going to find value. Now, listen in, pay attention, take some notes, enjoy. Let's begin. Alain Seckler, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
For the listeners, we have Alain Seckler here. He was originally from Luxembourg, trained to be a lawyer, started working in the UN, passed the bar exam, worked for UN in Geneva, Luxembourg, ex-Yugoslavia during the conflict as well, Haiti, Congo, Guinea Bissau, Western Sahara, and recently retired in New York. But then also during all that time, Alain was a diplomat for Luxembourg in both Brussels and the EU as well. And so we have a very interesting journey here, a little bit different to what we normally hear from in terms of people who have been in typical careers or people who have been entrepreneurial and the like. And we have, Alain, I'm really curious to be asking you a lot of questions about what it's like in this type of career where you're traveling the world basically in a charity or an NGO type organization. But before we dive into your journey, how do you define success?
Thank you, Harry. I think success is, of course, depends on each individual. Each of us has his own version and vision of success. One should not discount financial success or career success. But when it comes down to the essentials, to the basics, for me, success means not to have betrayed oneself, to have remained true to one's values and beliefs. And at the end of the day, to look oneself in the mirror and say, yes, I did what I had to do. That's the first dimension of my main definition of success. The other one is, yes, to try to make a difference in the world. Hopefully a positive one. To have an impact, to have influence, if you wish. To improve. Hope to improve people's lives, because it is needed in many parts of the world from what I had the chance to see close by. That would be my elements of success, of the main elements of success.
Okay, so the main element is this idea that you've got to be true to yourself and you've got to improve other people's lives.
Yes.
And you said that you measured that by being able to look yourself in the mirror and say that you did what you had to do and you did the right thing.
Yes.
And you said that's the main element. What are the other elements for you?
Other elements are to live a comfortable life, where you do not have to struggle every day to find your daily bread. It is to have a satisfying career or presence, professionally speaking, where you do things you really enjoy doing, and it's not easy to get where you want to go, to find that niche where you can really do what you enjoy doing, and in my case it took some time. So that is also success. Success means also to have a nice family life. I am lucky enough to have a wonderful wife who stands by my side. I have some good friends, some other family members. This also is success, if you wish. Without trying to be too trite or too conventional, but I think another element of success may be to develop one's own personality and enhancing one's own knowledge. Never to give up on enhancing one's knowledge, understanding of the world, and try to fit in.
Okay, that's interesting. Fitting in. And what does that mean?
Fitting in means making a difference, but making a difference in a positive manner, trying to improve what one has found, and trying to, without necessarily rocking the boat, but trying to make other people understand your own position so that together we can make a difference. I've tried that in parts of the countries where I was based, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
Yeah, so it's kind of like asserting yourself and your values.
Yes.
Harmoniously with others.
I would say as much as possible, because some people you cannot have a harmonious point of view, especially if they are too much entrenched in their own views, or if they have behavior which is not acceptable in my own opinion, be it through violence or be it through greed or other misbehavior, if I may say so. And there I stick to my guns.
Okay. When you're saying fitting in, it's kind of like saying finding your place in the world.
Yes.
Okay. Which means finding your place doesn't mean you just make sure other people are happy or just kind of resign to whatever's happening. But you see the situation where it is, and then you see where you, with all of your development and all your experience, are able to apply your skill set to be able to create the impact that you want to create.
Yes, but not only the skill set. I would also add the psychological insights to understand other people, to understand other cultures, other nations, and to try to bring about change as much as possible. You know, there's a wonderful saying by Victor Hugo. He said that an idea becomes irresistible when its time has come. And I want to be part of that process towards accelerating, the implementation of such ideas, if they are worth their while.
Okay. All right. So if we go back to the essential component, where you're saying being true to yourself and your values and your beliefs, being able to look yourself in the mirror and say that you did what you had to do because you're making a positive difference in the world, and that you're improving people's trying. Okay, so it's about the effort towards. Because I was going to say, how do you make sure? Like, how do you measure that you're successful? So if this is your definition, and this is what you're striving towards, how do you make sure that you're moving towards it?
That's a difficult question. I mean, because we always believe that success can be, or impact can be measured immediately. In most cases, it takes time. It takes time. What needs to take place is you need to set the right path towards, say, structural reform. It will afterwards be implemented slowly. But if you are right that you helped set the path towards positive change, you may see that in, 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, a generation too. But you feel that you are on the right track. You feel you're on the right track because you see slowly and steadily growing numbers of people adhere to the ideas you have, as being part of a team we have proposed to implement.
Yeah, okay. So it's more so the direction and the intention.
I would think so, yeah. Not only, sometimes it went quicker. For example, when you were able to help the stop of a massacre, then had immediate results. Or when you were able to help towards implementation, adoption of legislation, for example, anti-corruption legislation. That is tangible results. But in most cases, I would submit to you, it takes longer than that. So you may not necessarily see yourself the results of what you're trying to do, but you know somehow, somewhere that you're on the right track for many reasons.
Yeah, I've got more questions about that, but maybe we'll circle back to it later on. I'm now more curious about your journey. Do you want to kind of run us through, because you've had in many ways quite a successful career per se, but it hasn't been a typical career. You've been in NGOs, which is kind of like working for highly
Not NGOs.
bureaucratic charities. Well, what's the UN? Is UN not a NGO?
No.
No, what is
it's
it?
not an NGO. UN is an intergovernmental body.
Okay.
It's not an NGO. It
Right,
works
it's above
with-
governments
with-
as opposed to beneath
Well,
them, right?
yeah, it is. For example, we have the UN is composed of member states. I think currently we have 193. We started in 1945 with 50 member states.
Yeah, right.
And then you had decolonization and other instances. But right now there are 193, and maybe there will be more coming. Who knows? But it is intergovernmental.
Yeah, okay. So you've been in this. Is it appropriate to call it highly bureaucratic and basically that there are a lot of different factors and people and personalities and stakeholders and different influences in every decision that you make?
I think that not in all the decisions, but yes, it is a bureaucracy. At times heavy, at times not. Depends on situations. Depends also on the people who are populating some administrations and some organs and some of the agencies, for example, which are much more present on the ground. So may have a less bureaucratic overstructure, if I may say so.
Okay.
It depends. You have also bureaucracy is at times not bad because it allows for reflection, and you have different layers of presenting your ideas and writing reports, etc. And it is sometimes good to have different voices and different inputs before you prepare or finalize something. At other times, of course, you have the Security Council where you have the 5 big member states and then 10 temporary member states. They're there for 2 years. And of course, this is a reflection of the divisions of the world. And of course, it impacts on the United Nations.
So what was the moment that you decided you wanted to work at the UN?
Well, it came a little bit by chance, if I may say so. I was walking in Paris with 2 buddies of mine, and we were passing by an agency called UNESCO in Paris. I looked at my buddies and I said, let's see if they need some trainees.
So you were just looking for a job, were you?
Not really. I was looking for my pass. I was at the time working in the law office, but I wanted to expand my horizons, yeah. And by chance, I stumbled on it, and I was lucky enough. There was a senior official, a lady, a Japanese, Korean lady, who said, would you be interested in working on the temples of Angkor Wat, Cambodia? I said, yes. Would you be interested in working on the Greek legacy, Alexander's legacy in Afghanistan? I said, yes. Okay, here is a form. And a month later, I found lodging and etc. So I started a 3 months training with UNESCO, but you have to be based in Paris. You cannot just travel when you are a trainee. So I worked with Indian military engineers for the demining of the temples of Angkor Wat, Cambodia, which was fascinating. And then, by chance, somebody called me, a friend of mine, and said, would you like to attend or to participate in a competitive recruitment exam for the United Nations in Luxembourg? I said, why not? So I was lucky enough, prepared myself and participated in that exam, which was very competitive. And I was successful. So a few months later, I started my career in Geneva. That's how I started. But I always wanted to be, because I was always interested in history, international relations, literature, poetry, this kind of stuff. And yes, had read a lot about the UN, but never saw that I would, there was no plan, if you wish, to join them. It was more by chance. And I was lucky enough to grapple that and to...
Okay. And so then how long were you in the UN in Geneva for?
In Geneva, was between March 1990 to end 95, but interspersed with 1 year ex-Yugoslavia, 92, 93, and a few months in Haiti, end of 95. Before
So
moving
what were you doing in ex-Yugoslavia? Because that was during the conflict, right? That was during...
I was based in Belgrade. I was based in Zagreb, Croatia, and in Serbia, and then afterwards in Croatia. I was actually part of a contracts officer team. For example, contracts for the transport of our blue helmets, food for our own people, housing projects. For example, one specific case. One day there was an elderly gentleman who came into our office, and he begged us. He said, "Please, I am living in a small village, and if please place a few blue helmets in my house, because otherwise it will be burnt down." I suppose by his neighbors. So I said, "Yes, we'll do that." So what we did, we had a contract with him, a lease agreement with him, which was very honest.
When you say blue helmets, you mean the helmets, or do you mean the actual people, like the actual soldiers on the ground?
Peacekeepers.
Peacekeepers.
I mean, we call them. We nickname blue helmets, but they were troops, UN troops. So we had 4 or 5 of them, which were billeted in that particular home, and we signed the contract with him. And the day after, he came with a bottle of Slibovic, this Yugoslav alcohol, to thank us. And that's one of the elements where I saw concretely that we made an impact. Also, later on, I was told that a lot of our contracts also helped the local economy, both in wherever we were based, also helped the local economy not to go under by the strains of war. And it helped, for the day after, when some sums of peace came in. And I was part of that undertaking. So I was also near the front lines, especially in eastern Slavonia, where an offensive took place. I was told the animals which had been in the zoo were now dispersed along the banks of the river, somewhere, lions and what have you. And,
right.
And there are minefields all over the place, so I had also to be very careful when I was driving around.
Okay.
So that was my first...
So you were literally in the war zone, but you weren't in a military role. You were in...
No, civilian role.
Civilian role, and you were allocating resources towards civilians who needed it.
Civilians and our own troops and our own, for our own needs, our own contractual needs. For example, I negotiated hotel agreements for the billeting of troops, but also of our civilians, who are located lodging in hotels. We had this kind of hotel contracts.
Yeah. Okay. And so then you went back to Geneva for a bit, and then there was another change. What was the next? What was the next big change for you?
The next change was I was lucky enough, a very nice lady who was the advisor to the to the SRG, the special representative of the General of a Peace Mission in Haiti. At the time, it was the former Minister of Algeria of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Lakhdar Brahimi, whom I joined in at the end of 95, and at the time when I was in Haiti, at that time, I got an offer to go to New York to work as an examinations officer, because it was a political job. I worked in Mr. Brahimi's cabinet as a political affairs officer, advisor, in particular in relation to the Haitian parliament. I was a focal point between the UN mission and the Parliament of Haiti, especially the senators. So that was my role. It was also the time where, unfortunately, I say very unfortunately, because it has reverberations until today, when Mr. Itzhak Rabin was murdered in, what was it, in November 95?
Mm-hmm.
And that was, that I remember that instance.
How did
Because,
that affect your work in Haiti?
It did not affect my work in Haiti. I mean, per se, only that a number of people were very unhappy, very sad that this man, who was really the main driver of the Accords, of the peace Accords, was gunned down. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And lesser people afterwards remained on the scene.
Yeah, okay. So you were in Haiti when that happened. Obviously, you're very curious about that. That was the chance for what seemed to be peace in the Middle East. And
well, that will take a long time, but at least with the beginnings of something better.
Okay.
Let's put it this way, yeah.
Okay. And so that's while you were in Haiti. You were communicating between UN and the Haiti government. And then...
And Parliament, especially Parliament.
And Parliament. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then at some stage... So you did that both in Haiti and then also in New York? Or were you doing something different in New York?
In New York, I did something else. I mean,
okay.
Because I didn't know how long I would be staying in Haiti. I liked very much the job I was doing and the people I was working with in Haiti. But it was something which I don't know how long it would have lasted. I was offered another position, an administrative position in New York, to be an examinations and test officer. In other words, to administer exams, entry exams, for newcomers to the United Nations. It's the same kind of exam I took to enter the UN a couple of years earlier. So I accepted, and I was transferred to New York as of early '96.
Now, what I have no idea about any of this. I'm guessing that most of our listeners don't as well. But how big is that? Like, is that the equivalent of getting a significant promotion at work in your career? Like, was this a really big move? Did you really need to apply for it, or was it all based on who you knew and it was like this really exciting next step that you didn't know if you were ready for? Or was it kind of just a natural progression and it was just another thing to look for?
Yeah, it was something different, let's put it this way, and it was also a little promotion. Yeah, it was not a major promotion, but was a way for me to move to another step, to another level. And I always wanted to go to New York. I wanted to move around, and being offered to move to New York and to stay there not just on a temporary basis like I would have had in Haiti, but to stay there on a permanent basis was something which I took into consideration when I accepted that offer. After, discussions and I was chosen.
Had you met your wife by this stage?
I had met my wife actually earlier. I had been on assignment for a few months in New York in '93.
Okay.
And I met Barbara at that time, and she came with me to Geneva, and we married in Geneva. Actually, just before I left for Haiti in '95.
Yeah. Okay.
Then
she met after Serbia and Croatia, or ex-Yugoslavia.
Yes.
You met in Geneva. You got married.
We met in New York. No, we met in New York.
You met in New York.
On assignment. I was on a short assignment in New York, and I was lucky enough to meet her there. Mm-hmm. Then she joined me in Geneva. Because I went back to Geneva after my experience in ex-Yugoslavia, and we got married there. And then afterwards, she stayed a little bit longer in Geneva and joined me afterwards in New York.
Did she join you in Haiti?
She came to visit me in Haiti, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
There you go.
Rather spectacular, I must say.
Okay, and is that one of the reasons you wanted more stability? Is because you're married and your wife's back in the US?
Well, she came afterwards. I mean, she stayed a lot longer in Geneva because she had also some opportunities to work as a consultant in Geneva. But once that was over, she came over to New York to join me.
Okay. All right, so you started doing you started doing this kind of work where you were creating the exams and the recruitment processes for
preparing the questions and so on. It was very administrative work.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just a stepping stone to try to do something else. I was interested, as I told you, in international relations, history, political affairs, etc. And also it was also a way to improve my English because mostly I wrote in French. Where there are two official UN languages, French and English, and you have 6 official languages because you have to add Arabic and Russian and Chinese and Spanish.
Okay.
But the working languages are French and English. So it was also a way for me in New York to improve my English language skills.
So what happened next?
What happened next was I started looking around for other opportunities.
Is this what, 5 years later or so?
Yeah, it was. I mean, in '97, I was there for 3 months or 4 months. I worked as a Luxembourg diplomat. I took a leave, what they call leave of absence without pay, unpaid leave of absence, where for 4 months I worked for Luxembourg, working on disarmament matters, in particular this mine ban treaty, which was, I think, was promulgated in '98. So we worked on that very actively. And then I went back to my posting as an examination and test officer, and then it so happened that I was lucky enough to be offered a position in peacekeeping operations, what they called at the time DPK, or Department of Peacekeeping Operations, which is now called DPO, Department of Peace Operations. And yes, and I started in a department where we worked mainly on Congo and Western Sahara.
And what were you mainly doing there? Like, what was your role in doing the peacekeeping operation? And did you have people reporting to you at this stage? Like, did you have direct reports?
I was reporting to others.
Yeah. Okay. And how much influence did you have over what was being done? Or what was your role and what were you responsible for?
I was particularly responsible for, we get reports from every day from our mission in Congo, say, and then we have to extract the important elements of it to report to our bosses. We're writing analytical notes at times to the Secretary General. For example, when there was an attack on a village and people were murdered, or there were some major political developments, adoption of important legislation, or elections. For example, we were involved in elections, to report on presidential elections, and also we were also working with our electoral affairs colleagues because they were very much involved in assisting in the holding of elections in Congo, be it parliamentary elections, be it presidential elections. You had 3 levels of elections. You have the presidential and national parliament elections at the national level. You had provincial elections and local elections. Local elections never took place because there was no, the logistics were not there. But the elections at the provincial and national elections took place, and we were heavily involved in assisting in the implementation and the holding of these elections. For example, transport of ballot materials, working closely with the Congolese National Electoral Commission to make sure that elections were free and fair. This kind of things. So we were heavily involved with that because it also impacted on our peace operations. This kind of stuff. So we wrote notes to our superiors, and at times notes which reached the level of the Secretary General.
Yeah, okay. So you were there writing note. You were part of a team. How big was the team that was doing this?
More or less, as Foreign Affairs Officer, we were probably 4 or 5.
Yeah.
More or less.
So the 4 or 5 of you were there in that
as support,
and making.
Not administration. We were in a support role, if you wish. But there were other parts of the UN in New York which had handled other topics, which were administrative nature, of strictly military nature, because we had military officers, police officers, we had the police department, the military department, administrative department, a political department in which we were involved. But what's interesting with our teams, where we had representatives from the administration, from the military, and the police were part of our political team, if you wish. I mean, it was a multitasking team. You know, it was a diverse group of people. As I said, 4 or 5 political, one from administration, one from police, one from military, reporting to our immediate boss, and all those were part of the Department of Peacekeeping Operations. And those from the administration were temporarily assigned to our team. Same for military and police. They are assigned from the military office or from the police department to our own team.
Okay, so like the 5 or 6 of you in that team were responsible for allocating resources, but then also reporting back to UN, like back to your superiors.
Yes, I mean, we were a team, as I said, we had people who were looking at the budgetary aspects, we had people looking at the military aspects, others looking at the police aspects, administrative aspects, and we looked at the political aspects of it. But all together, we worked together so that you had some kind of complete picture of what was going on in Congo.
Yeah. Okay.
In support of the peace mission in Congo. In other words, all of us were in a supportive role with our colleagues in Congo. And the mission at the time was called MONUC. Now it's called MONUSCO. The element of S means stabilization in Congo, which was added in 2010. And that's how we have been working on it. Of course, we're also involved in the drafting of the Secretary General's reports, which were, I believe, on every 3 months at that time. And probably still are, or it's now 6 months, I remember. But on a regular basis, our colleagues sent us their drafts, and then we completed the draft before it went through the motions until it went to the office of the Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, before it went to the Secretary General's office, afterwards it became public. And then there were discussions taking place at the level
of the political echelon, kind of.
Yeah, but also at member states, in other words, especially the Security Council, because all this fall under the purview of the Security Council, and which then afterwards you had the adoption of resolutions, Security Council resolutions. For example, the mandate of the peace operations was usually 1 year. And then there were discussions and debates looking at the Secretary General's reports, and then afterwards the mandates were changed. For example, when the elections were to take place, the Security Council agreed on including an element on assistance to elections, for example. And this new resolution of the Security Council was adopted usually on a yearly basis. So it changed every year depending on the circumstances. But usually it was a continuum, if you wish, of the preceding years.
Okay. And so then what happened? So you spent some time in Congo, Western Sahara, and you were...
I spent some time first in Western Sahara. When was it? In 92, 93. I was a desk officer also for Western Sahara at that time, and for working on Congo, but mostly Western Sahara at that time. I went there on mission, on assignment, not for a long period of time because I was desk officer in New York, went back, and then I was mainly affected to work on Congo. And I also wanted to have... Yeah, the Democratic Republic of Congo, because you have two Congos. You have the Republic of Congo, which is the ex-French Congo, with Brazzaville as capital, and then you have Democratic Republic of the Congo. Before it was known as Zaire under Mobutu, but it was a former Belgian colony, with a much bigger country than the French Congo, former French Congo. So I again wanted to have some field experience. So I went there from 2003 to 2004, and then came the opportunity to work on. So I circulated around the country. I was in Eastern Congo, I was in Central Congo, and close up saw what was happening. For example, we had to discuss with some armed groups to remove themselves from certain areas, this kind of stuff. Then in 2004, 2005, again, I took a leave of absence without pay, unpaid, to work for Luxembourg in Brussels, where I worked on many different dossiers. It was a time when new members joined the European Union from former Soviet bloc. They joined. It was very interesting. I must say, I really.
Just before we go across to what you're doing for Luxembourg and Brussels, you said that you were you're circling around Congo. And you just said that you were negotiating or speaking to armed groups.
Let me give one example. Well, there was a peace accord by which one of the armed groups decided to disarm, but part of the accord was also that the legitimate government would come in and change all the administrative positions held in certain areas by some members of these armed groups. So we had a situation where one of the provinces, the governor, belonged to one of these armed groups. And he had to leave, but he was a bit reluctant to leave his position. So we negotiated with him and his team to vacate the position. That's what happened. He left peacefully. And so that the peace accord could be implemented between the government and some of the groups, which became political parties, if you wish, before the holding of the elections in 2006, if I remember correctly. So I was involved.
This is a little bit less about you and maybe even of less interest to the listeners, but I'm quite curious. So I know very little of Congo and what happened in the history there. But with the picture that you're painting, it sounds like there are a whole bunch of different militant groups because they didn't trust the government. So ultimately there was no rule, there was no law and order, or minimal.
It was a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, it was called sometimes the first war of Africa. In other words, there were a number of, after the downfall of President Mobutu, you had, and afterwards the assassination of his successor, the elder Kabila, who had been a rebel leader for 30 plus years. You again had involvement of some member states supporting armed groups. And there were negotiations which led in 1998 to a ceasefire agreement and afterwards to the holding of elections, I think, which led to the election of Kabila the Younger. I don't remember exactly when, but I think it was 2003, 2004. And at that time, there had been negotiations which led to a ceasefire and then to a peace accord between the government and various armed groups. And the members, the neighboring countries, withdrew at that time from Congo, and some of the armed groups which had been receiving help from member states, from neighboring states, also decided to turn into political parties. And that is where the element of negotiations came in to that this departure would happen peacefully. That's where we came in, you see.
Yeah, okay. So it was essentially you had a you had a whole bunch of militant groups that were being funded by Congo's neighbors. And then
That's what is, that's
and the
what
UN
we
coming
believe.
in was primarily intention to try and get member states to be like the neighbors to be less influential in
Yeah, I mean,
in what was
it
happening
means
there.
basically to help Congo find its full sovereignty and control over its territory. This is still work in progress, even as we speak today, for many reasons. For many reasons, which are very complicated. But right now, apparently, there are over 100 armed groups, especially in eastern Congo.
Right.
They are mostly ethnic based, according to to the ethnic group has their own armed group, but some of them are still, it seems, funded by neighboring states, and in some cases even there is reports of presence of troops of at least one neighboring state in eastern Congo. But that is later. Right now. It led to elections being held. By the way, I was present when they were held in 2006 because I came back after my year spent in Brussels. I came back to Congo, and I stayed there 4 years.
Right.
Because I liked it. I liked the country, I liked the atmosphere, I liked the challenges. I learned a lot in terms of looking at problems of poverty, poor governance, armed groups' presence, difficulties of building or rebuilding state presence. Also, our own presence has very often been criticized, sometimes rightly so, sometimes mostly not, because we can only work in support of, we cannot substituting for governmental institutions. And had it not been for the UN, I would like to say, had it not been for UN presence and our peacekeepers and humanitarian agencies, there would have been much more turmoil and much more destruction, death and destruction in the countries in which we operate.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, it sounds like it hasn't actually achieved the goals that were primarily there. It's kind of like, okay, great, let's get Congo to stand on its own 2 feet. Let's make it independent. And I'm not asking so much in terms of a critique of the UN. I'm talking more so in terms of how this relates to your definition of success. Right? Because you're like, well, I want to make sure that I'm contributing towards something, that I'm doing the right thing, that it's moving in the right direction, and that it's ultimately positive.
Let me give you one example. I mean, so many times we prevented massacres from taking place, and that was not reported in newspapers because there was nothing to report. Because it was the presence of our peacekeepers in certain villages or along certain roads which prevented attacks from taking place. Because we did not have, we still do not have, even less and less now, troops on the ground, some attacks could not be prevented because we just were not there. We did not have the manpower to be there. And then this is reported. Then because a massacre took place, a disaster took place. So, yes, I could see close up that where we were involved, we could prevent more tragedies from happening. And that could be seen, if you wish, for me, as a kind of small success. But the problem is you need to have partners who are willing to do this, to have the same objective as one has. In other words, for example, one example from something which I find, and that's a comment of a general nature. I believe that poor governance, or put it otherwise, corruption, is perhaps the root causes of conflict in many cases. If you are able, for example, if you do not pay your troops, or if you do not bring in water and electricity, or if you do not rebuild infrastructure, you lay already open the causes for the next conflict. Because, for example, your troops are not paid. The national troops are not paid. They behave not the way they should be behaving. lack of discipline, and the population are very often preyed upon by everybody, be it some of the troops of the national government, but also armed groups, militias. And because this question has not been satisfactorily addressed, our role is to prevent things, but not to bring about change, because our partners do not necessarily always do as they should be doing. It does not mean that we are blameless. We also have our own problems. But from what I have seen, in many cases, we have prevented further worse things from happening. And also, a lot of our counterparts, our national counterparts, are very willing to help and do what needs to be done. But Congo is a very complex country, a huge country, which is some parts very difficult to reach even. And we only reach. We have helicopters, we have planes. The roads are very difficult to cross. You see, all these elements, I saw them close up. I was not in New York or elsewhere. I saw close up the difficulties we were facing on a daily basis.
A lot of people will be more likely to do the things that they really want to do, or do the things that they say that they want to do when other people are watching. As in,
Yes,
for example,
correct.
a lot of people, they'll go for a run because their watch is recording it, and they know that gets shared to a social thing or Strava or whatever it is, and that other people will see it. And they go, okay, right, I'm doing it because other people are going to see it. And the most successful people I know tend to not, like the most successful runners I know, tend to not even share all of their runs. Or they don't really care if people see it or not. Sometimes they just won't even record it. And similar to that, like a lot of people will put in long hours or work all-nighters, or really ultimately sacrifice in a positive way other things that they really want for the sake of their business or for the sake of their career. And they're not doing it just to improve their image. They're doing it because they know that it's the best thing for them to do. And it sounds like that was much of the approach, or that was much of the justification for the energy and effort and the years of your life that you'd put into what happened at UN, or what you did, like, for example, in Congo. Because it's like, well, I could see all of these benefits myself, and some of the people who are close to me can see the benefits as well. But most of the people in the world will never know that we just stopped a massacre. Most of the people in the world will never know that we just stopped this man's home being burnt down in ex-Yugoslavia. Was that kind of the approach that you're taking, or did you have something else that kept you going here? Because it must have been frustrating going there for a particular mandate, and then the news and maybe even much of the political echelon and the member states wouldn't actually know what benefit you're implementing, because they can't see what didn't happen. They only see the bad things that do happen.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say I knew what I was doing. I did not do it for, that we got applause or whatever. But however, being present also made sure that those we were working with knew that they were being watched. And reports were made to the Security Council, so those who needed to know knew what was happening. Mr. Brahimi wrote an important report in the year 2000, I believe, about a reform of the United Nations peace operations and etc. and in general. And he said, the United Nations, we need to let member states know what they need to know, not what they wish to know. In other words, we tell the truth.
Yep.
We're telling people maybe things they do not like to hear. And we did the same in our conversations with actors, not national and international actors, what we thought they needed to hear. And sometimes we were successful, sometimes we were not. but I think it's very important parts of my life and my work, because I saw close up what could work, what did not work, lessons to be learned, which still, I believe, could be implemented. I got a better understanding also of the courage of so many people, the people one never talks about, the poor people in the countryside, the peasants, the farmers who every day go onto their farms, on their lands, and may be attacked by some militias. The soldiers, yes, the soldiers who, I'm talking about the Congolese soldiers who were fighting and often risking their lives. One should, and others who did not behave well. And while on the UN side, you saw a lot of people who remained idealistic. I mean, I myself, I have an element of idealism because I believe in the values of the UN Charter, in the principles of the UN Charter, and I more than ever believe in them. Does it mean that it's always adhered to? No. We're making all mistakes. But I think that the UN, more than ever, is indispensable to striking a minimum balance in the world and to remain as much as possible an impartial observer and actor. That is where peace operations come into play. Do they do enough? Not always, but much better than not being there, because otherwise you would have governments doing as they wish to do without any reporters, without any observations, without and terrible things are happening and we do not know about them at all.
Okay.
That is why I believe that, I mean, I grew as a human being, as a man. I grew in this peace in the field, in these operations.
And in which ways did you grow as a man, as a human being?
As a man, I think first of all, I was sometimes in stressful situations and I remained very calm. I mean, very strangely enough, but I remained very calm. I also grew because I understood much better the concerns of all. I was much less judgmental. I tried to understand why certain people behaved in such and such manner, and I think I got a better understanding of the problems of the world. So it increased my knowledge, my experience, my empathy towards people. So I think I grew in many respects. Also, yes, I am an avid reader of books, but that's not enough. You need to be confronted with reality on the ground and see what's really happening before you can make any informed judgment and come up with solutions which are more than just theoretical ones. And understand the complexity of the world's problems in all domains,
Okay. And so what happened after Congo? So after the second round of Congo, then what?
Well, in second round of Congo, I went back to headquarters from 2010 to 2015. I continued working on Congo, but this time as a desk officer with a much better understanding what was going on in the field. So helping to write reports, Secretary General's reports and analytical notes and this kind of work. Also, we also bring in new people coming in, and I was one of the, those who would try to help them and get a better understanding of the situations. So for 5 years, basically, I was in that team in New York, and sharing my experience and my knowledge with other colleagues. And also remaining closely in touch with my Congolese friends, those I had known in the field. In particular, I had very good relations with and worked closely also with what's called the religious denominations. Protestants, Catholics, Muslims, Jewish people, those from traditional religions, voilà, and trying also to put that to good use in my analysis of the situation.
Where was it you're talking about interfaith stuff based on Congo or in a different area?
That were mostly in Congo, yeah. Mostly in Congo. Yeah, but I also traveled, when I was in Congo, to other areas. I was in Rwanda. Yeah, that was later. In Kenya. But that was later, sorry, that was after 2015, because my last stint was 6 years again in the field with one of my favorite bosses. I was his political advisor. At the time also had moved up the ladder and spent 6 years with somebody who was a gentleman of the old school, a certain Dr. Diallo, Mamadou Diallo from Guinea Conakry. And I was his political advisor first in DRC, 2016, 2017, then in Haiti, 2018, 2019, where already you could see already the beginnings of what we see today developing in Haiti. And then from 2020-21 in Guinea Bissau, south of Senegal. And then I came back in 2022 for another year before retiring and going to greener pastures since mid-2023.
When you were saying that you went up the ladder, what did you mean by that?
I mean promotion.
Does that mean people were reporting to you, or it just means you had more influence in what was being reported?
It means that I'm at a higher level, and maybe my voice would be heard a little bit more. And when I was in the field, I got another promotion. But this is a temporary one, as long as one is in the field, and after it's when you go back to your old, when you go back to your old, it doesn't matter. But I had higher levels of authority, and especially I was advisor to my new boss. I was political advisor, his main political advisor, if you wish, and we did things together which were positive. Yeah.
Okay, and what have you done since greener pastures? What are those greener pastures like?
The greener pastures are one. I'm much more often here at home, which is not always welcome. I am part of a discussion group, so twice a week we discuss, news such as the war in Ukraine, Middle East, currently the U.S. elections, developments in Europe. Talking a little bit about some. I try to brief my colleagues on what's happening, with friends, what's happening in Congo or Haiti, giving them a different take at what's happening. I am also working on humanitarian projects with people who are asking for my advice in Congo and in Haiti. And I continue what I like very much, reading books in French, German, and English.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, it sounds like a pretty cool journey, and it's quite different in many senses because you've seen many different parts of the world. You've been exposed to different cultures and different areas. You didn't end up having the so-called typical life of getting a career, settling down, having kids, and just going for a couple of holidays a year type thing.
Yes.
It's been very different, and it was quite interesting to hear you sharing how you grew as a person, as a man, through UN. Because I know that one of your elements of success was how much you can grow grow your mind, grow your skill set, grow your approach to the world. And you're saying that it was learning to become very calm in stressful situations, and becoming less judgmental of situations to gain a better understanding of the problems of the world, and just wanting to read more because knowing how complex the world is.
Not only that, but also, if I may add, also to have a dispassionate look at things, understanding why.
You say dispassionate?
Yeah, dispassionate and passionate at the same time, but dispassionate in the analysis, let's put it this way. Humane, humanistic, yes, but also understanding dispassionately why certain situations happen, so as to remain as objective as possible in my analysis.
So you've learned to recognize what's most important, or whatever values are highest for you.
Values, and also implementing them in a way which is hopefully wise.
So how do you manage conflicts with someone that you significantly disagree with? You're looking at a situation, and I mean, nowadays you don't have the same weight or influence as you did before, right? But you look at a situation and there's a little bit of conflict, or you're looking at a complex situation, and you want to be both humane and empathetic, but also objective and dispassionate. How do you remain humane and empathetic, but dispassionate at the same time? I think I know what you mean, but I'm more curious.
Not being too judgmental, understanding first of all where a person comes from, what happened in this person's life to behave in a way which I may totally disagree with. So in other words, I've learned to not immediately respond, but to take my time to reflect on why, and then preparing an answer. Response, but a response which is firm, but at the same time empathetic. You see what I mean? I will stand by my positions. Sometimes I remain in the minority, but that's okay. But I will stick by my guns on the essentials. But it does not mean that I will not tell the person I understand, but these are my viewpoint. This is my viewpoint.
Okay.
And I respect yours.
Have there been any other key life lessons that you've learned through your journey?
Yes, I must say I started after high school. There was a little bit of, I think, moral pressure for me to start on the journey of studying medicine, and I disliked it very much. It was not for me, but I needed to have the courage to tell that to those who wanted me to continue that way. I was reading Napoleon's military campaigns instead of studying anatomy, for example, this kind of stuff. So for me it was clear that I need to do something else. And I was finally able to convince those I wanted to convince, and I started to study law and political science. And I felt much better taking that route, if you wish. That was, I think, my first pivotal moment, which led to everything else.
And what was the next pivotal moment?
One was that I wanted to see the world, but not as a tourist, but as somebody who was involved in things and maybe make an impact. And that's how, really by luck, because I always, did it by myself. Yeah, did not have much support here or there. So I learned to, by luck, to fall flat on my nose and stand up again and again. And that's one of the lessons I learned. Never give up, ever. Stick by your guns. Read, learn, remain open in mindsets, remain open, but stick to your guns. I mean, if you are a good person, if you are a bad one, that's another story. If you think yourself you want to do good, stick by your guns. And also, what also should, I always hear people talking about IQ, etc. I put a lot of emphasis on EQ.
Yeah, emotional quotient.
Yeah, emotional quotient, absolutely. And I think it is very much often lacking in political analysis or strategic decisions because you do not understand the motivations of those facing you when you're taking life and death decisions. You have to understand where other people are coming from. In other words, you need to sense them. You need to have this, you see what I mean? You have to have this kind of empathy for the positions of even of those of people you may not necessarily like, or with positions you may fully disagree with. You need to understand before you can reach a conclusion. And in other words, I am somebody, as I said, I fell flat on my nose many times, but each time I got up again and walking. Because basically, fundamentally, I believed in myself and what I wanted to achieve. And still continuing, hopefully, to some point in time to continue on that journey. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all that. To kind of summarize your definition of success, in line with what you just shared and everything you've shared over the last hour or so, is basically to stay true to yourself, stick by your guns, make a difference in the world, or at least a positive one. Hopefully try to improve people's lives and do the things that you have a strong conviction will improve people's lives either immediately or even further down the line, maybe even generations away. And to be able to look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day or at the end of your life, perhaps, and say that you did what you had to do. Yes, you want to be able to live a comfortable life. Yes, you want to develop your career and your presence, your influence, and do what you enjoy while making an impact. And yes, you want to be able to have a nice family life, which you've been able to grow. And yes, you want to develop yourself and your own strength, your personality, and enhance your knowledge and never give up on growth. And you want to be able to know where you stand in a situation, to know how much influence you can exert while making sure that you can maintain as much harmony as possible.
And sometimes, if one thinks about leadership roles, what I thought about this a couple of times. What is a leader? What for me is a leader? I mean, I'm a democratically minded person, let's put it this way.
Yeah.
And you know the definition of Winston Churchill about democracy.
No, what was his definition?
It's the worst of all political systems with the exception of everything else. You know?
Yeah.
And I think that was very wise of him to state that. But people forget, you cannot hide behind others. You need to stand up and you need to be able to defend your positions. And you must be perceived as defending them, not just behind closed doors. You need to be seen as somebody who says, that's where I stand. At the same time, very open to advice and etc. But and also not to forget, as a friend of mine once said in Congo when we were talking about elections, Alain, he said, Alain, we do not eat elections. In other words, fine about political developments, but if you forget the socio-economic ones, there will be no democracy. There will be something else. And if you look around in the world, there are some regimes which are autocratic, but not corrupt, or not or with much better governance. You have others which are both autocratic and poor governance, but not always. And you have democracies which are in deep trouble because at some point in time the leaders lost it. And for many reasons. And that leads to turmoil. And so in other words, you want to strengthen democracy, you need to have leaders who believe strongly in political, socio-economic reforms altogether, and combine it with incorruptibility, being non-corrupt, good governance, in other words, which is too often forgotten by well-meaning people around the world. You have to combine these elements.
Thank you for sharing all of that. Is there a final message you'd want to share to the listeners, or anything that you'd, even if it's a summary, like a short couple sentences of summary of overall your life message, or what your experience of a so far successful life is able to maybe help someone else, a breadcrumb that might just be able to help them? What would be a final message you'd want to share?
I would say people should never turn into cynics. I've seen too many people over the course of their lives, because they've had a sense of failure, or because they were betrayed, or whatever have you, or just wanted to get wealthy very quickly and damn the costs, the political costs. People should never, ever turn to cynicism, which is, in my view, is the worst, one of the worst moral defeats. Second, they should stick by their guns if they have good intentions, and they would fight for them, even if some people may look at them as being naive or out of order, what have you. Stick to your guns. Believe in yourselves. Also consider that most people are kind. Many are not, true. But try to find those in whom you can have trust, like-minded, not necessarily politically, but like-minded in terms of the values, and create strong bonds to move forward on important issues. Never give up. You fall on your nose, you get up again. You fall as many times, but you stand up. You never give up. Would be one of my main messages. And luck, or lack of luck, plays a role in human endeavors. Read, there's another element. Read books. Not only, and try to understand other people's work and behavioral patterns, but read. The more you read, I know I've read, I think, quite a number of books, and I know that I don't know much, but at least I know that. Huh? And try to remain a good human being. It is not so easy as one thinks, because there are many temptations, there are many deviations, there are many seductions possible. Remain true to yourself. Never forget that beauty, yes, is external often, but much more important, it is internal. And that should never change.
So I hope you received a whole lot of value from engaging in that conversation. What were the key takeaways for you? What can you schedule in your life right now to make sure that the time you just invested into listening to this exceptional conversation with this amazing mentor and this amazing individual is time that wasn't misused, but was time that you've allocated properly to enhancing your life and improving it? Whatever it is, schedule it now, practice it now, be the successful person you're meant to be, live with purpose.